Hi everyone.
Greetings, everybody.
We're in the Pure Worship book, chapter 11. The title of the chapter is I have appointed you a watchman. Ezekiel 33:7. We read the first three paragraphs the last time.
Yes, we did, but we didn't make the point emphatically anyway. Again, it's a bit of one verse here. I have appointed you a watchman. What's the rest of the verse say? Mm-hmm. And they actually tell you to read it, but don't quote it here, right?
Yeah.
So you, son of man, I have made a watchman for the house of Israel. So far, so good. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. Mm-hmm. So why is that part left out? Because you don't get points for just opening your mouth, right?
Yeah. And they've not heard from the Lord. They're just making it up as they go.
That's the double thing going on here. We are the watchmen. We somehow are the antitype of the prophet Ezekiel and all the other watchmen they'll talk about here.
Yeah.
We are the antitype of that type. But on the other hand, don't hold us accountable for what we say that is not true.
So we'll warn you, but it might not be true.
Yeah. So we want to read the paragraphs because you've got to follow the flow of their argument here to really understand why this is such a big problem. It's because really the takeaway is not really about the watchman, i.e. an anointed prophet who happens to be also an anointed priest, Ezekiel. Mm-hmm. It's about you Jehovah's Witnesses who are not anointed, either as prophets or priests.
So, yeah.
But are accountable for the blood of the people who you don't warn.
So the subtitle was, You Must Warn Them from Me. Okay, you were going to read the beginning.
Yeah. You must warn them from me. Literal watchmen often stood on the walls of a city to help keep the inhabitants safe. They served as tangible evidence that the ruler of the city cared for his subjects. Yeah? Although a blast from a watchman's horn might startle the sleeping residents, that same piercing call could save the lives of those who responded to it. Similarly, Jehovah appointed watchmen, notice it's a plural, not because he wanted to terrorize the Israelites with messages of doom, but because he cared for his people and wanted to save lives. When appointing Ezekiel to be a watchman, Jehovah revealed aspects of his personality that we find reassuring. Consider just two of those attributes.
Mm-hmm. So in contrast, when the watchman blew the horn, it was a one-time event. It wasn't a continuous blowing.
A continuous piercing noise for 140 years.
Yeah. It has in bold justice. Jehovah's justice is evident in that he deals impartially with us as individuals. For example, although Ezekiel's message was heard and rejected by large crowds, Jehovah did not treat all the Israelites as a rebellious mob. Rather, he wanted to see how individuals responded. He repeatedly speaks about talking to the wicked one and to someone righteous. Therefore, Jehovah passes judgment based on how each individual reacts to the message. Jehovah's justice can also be seen by the way in which he judges people. Individuals are held accountable, not for what they did in the past, but for how they respond to the current warning. Jehovah told Ezekiel, When I say to the wicked one, you will surely die, and he turns away from his sin and does what is just and righteous, he will surely keep living. Then Jehovah adds a remarkable statement. None of the sins he committed will be held against him. On the other hand, those who follow a righteous path cannot expect past obedience to excuse current rebellion. Jehovah stated that if a man trusts in his own righteousness and does what is wrong, none of his righteous acts will be remembered, but he will die for the wrong he has done. Jehovah's sense of justice is further evident in that he gives due warning before he acts. Ezekiel began his work some 6 years before the Babylonian army destroyed Jerusalem. But Ezekiel was not the first to warn God's people that they would be held accountable. For more than a century prior to the destruction of Jerusalem, Jehovah sent the prophet Hosea, Isaiah, Micah, Oded, and Jeremiah to act as watchmen. Jehovah had Jeremiah remind the Israelites, "I appointed watchmen who said, 'Pay attention to the sound of the horn.' Neither Jehovah nor those watchmen would be held accountable for the lives lost when the Babylonians finally executed Jehovah's judgment."
Fair enough. But in proving that God judges individuals, you've actually exploded your whole argument, because your whole argument, application-wise, depends upon identifying a class, the great crowd who are vindicated because they're part of Jehovah's organization. They get through Armageddon. And more specifically and more emphatically, the watchman class. Who is that? Well, it's the antitypical prophet Ezekiel class, as they more commonly call, right? So he's judging classes, but he's judging individuals. Don't you get that you've just listed a bunch of prophets who you say were judged individually by their faithfulness and their messages? But that's not true today. We don't judge the faithful and discreet slave class by the individuals within it, do we? No, we assume that the whole class
That's right.
is judged.
So they mention Jeremiah there. And in Jeremiah, there is an account of Jeremiah versus another prophet. And that prophet proves to be a false prophet. He says the exact same thing as Jeremiah, except he changes the timing.
Yeah, Jeremiah said 70 years.
And he
Hananiah
says
2 years.
And he dies as a result of being a false prophet.
So Jehovah vindicates his true prophet, and he vindicates him within the 2-year period, just to make a point. He died before the 2 years was over.
Yeah, they weren't the faithful and discreet prophet class.
And after the 2 years, he was not vindicated. That is, Hananiah was not vindicated, but Jeremiah was, because
That's right.
the exile does go on for 70 years. You just made the point here, too, that Ezekiel only served for 6 years, and then he's vindicated 6 years after he starts prophesying that Jerusalem, which still stands in those days, is going to fall. He doesn't have a date, but within 6 years, they learned that this living prophet among them in Babylon is a true prophet. And that's, if you look through the records of all these people, starting with Isaiah, let's say, if you read the book of Isaiah with those eyes open as to how did Jehovah prove that Isaiah was a true prophet, well, the same way. Things that were prophesied specifically by Isaiah during his lifetime were vindicated. Isaiah was vindicated as a true prophet even while Isaiah was still alive. Now, is that true of any of the prophets that you say have been used by God among your faithful and discreet slave class? Well, you've had 4, 5, 6, 7 presidents now? And all 7 of them, all of the 6 I can think of by name, are dead. So really, everything they have said has been exploded by God himself. And that's why the metaphors here, the shadows and types, all collapse. Because, first of all, you're not applying it to a watchman class. You're applying it to, unfortunately, the rank and file Jehovah's Witness, the blood guilt aspect.
I noticed something while we were reading this. This wasn't scripted. So this is kind of a question too. You know, they make this comment. They say that the individuals are accountable not for what they did in the past, but for how they respond to the current warning. But when you read the passage, he's talking about how they live. He's not talking about some warning he's giving them. He's talking about, if you behave this way, and do this and do that, take advantage, all the sins he talks about. If you live that way, you're going to be judged for that.
That's right.
So it's not about how you respond to me warning you. It's about how are you living?
Yeah.
Are you living up to the commandments of God? So I think that their focus is always on their preaching, their warning.
Response to the warning.
And your response to them, instead of God's looking at how you live.
Yeah. So the warning message of Ezekiel had to do with life.
Yeah.
So if you just read the 2 chapters where they get this idea of the blood guilt from, that is chapter 18 of Ezekiel and chapter 33, this particular one, read those 2 chapters and you have a list of the things that you're supposed to do if you're expecting to survive the coming judgment. And the witnesses don't dwell on that. They have their own list of things to do.
Yeah, it's how do you respond to us? Did you take the literature?
Now you'll see right away, I think, if you read those 2 chapters, 18 and 33, that most of the things God wants them to do are social responsibilities.
Yeah.
They don't have much to do with listening to Ezekiel, other than Ezekiel's just telling you what the prophets and what Moses told you.
Yeah.
He's
How to
telling you to
behave,
do it
how to
and
live.
do it now. How to live. What's our link?
Our link is the video we did on the story of Hananiah, the false prophet, and Jeremiah. So it's called Jeremiah Forced 2 JWs, that's us, to face the seriousness of false prophecy.
Yeah. It's based on 2 chapters which were definitely countercultural if you were living in Judea and Jerusalem at the time, where Jeremiah is sent with a very, very hard message, namely that I'm using Nebuchadnezzar now as my servant. Submit to Nebuchadnezzar. So 27, 28 are both on build up to the Hananiah confrontation. See you next time.
Bye.